Since I haven't said it formally yet, welcome to the Zeitcast. I'm so excited to be doing this live in Oklahoma City with my dear friend Carlos Rodriguez. I tell people all the time, in addition to being one of my favorite people, he's one of my favorite preachers. Y'all, he's an incredible preacher, an amazing communicator. I love his books, not because I wrote the foreword to the last one, Drop the Stones, but I love that. I was so excited you asked me because I so love the book and so believe in the book. And, Carlos is just, many of you know him, of course, from his work in Puerto Rico and the Happy NPO. There's so many beautiful things that he's doing in the world, but it's just good for my own soul to have you here this weekend and just kind of pouring into us. So thank you. Your first time in the state of Oklahoma, is that right?
First time.
That's amazing.
It feels good.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome
Last
to
night,
Oklahoma.
Jonathan picked me up. We went out for drinks, as you do when you land from Puerto Rico. And
we didn't probably 15 years ago, but we do now.
We do now. It was awesome. It's like across the...
Yeah, Jones Assembly. I took him to Jones. I didn't
so
realize
nice.
this is quite this close. Yeah.
I had the best Buddha bowl I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. Somebody out there listening to the podcast is saying, Brother Carlos ate a Buddha bowl?
I had a great cocktail and an amazing Buddha bowl.
Did I not have a Jesus bowl?
And then... I'm sure we could come up with that.
Probably.
Yeah.
We should do that.
And then we just started sharing stories, and it's been a long time since I've actually woken up with ab pain because of laughing so hard.
I've never seen you laugh as hard as you did last night. That made me really
standing
happy.
up.
That was
I'm
great.
doing full Puerto Rican,
Yes,
roaming up and down the hall.
He was. And then the bartenders were all
Everybody's
watching
looking at
him. It
me.
was really great.
It was amazing.
I
and
told
I woke
my
up
most
this morning
awkward
with
stories.
pain.
That's so
That's
great.
how good that was.
So great. And then today, just so y'all know, people who are from Oklahoma City, I took Carlos to Cafe Cacao. That also seemed to be a home run. So that went over. Pretty good.
Wow.
Pretty special.
So I hate it when the expectations are too high, like Avatar.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible movie. Everybody was like, Avatar. There's people imagining they're in Pandora. I mean, it was wild how people got into Avatar. And then I went to see it with my wife, and we were both like, this is terrible. All that to say, he's talking about this breakfast place, best in the world, best in America, better than, and I'm like, Avatar. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But man, it lived up to the hype. So shout out to those people.
I had told Carlos on the way that it's, because I'm a connoisseur of breakfast. It's one of the best breakfast spots in America. And I could tell, I didn't think he really believed me. But y'all should know, I say things that are true about God from time to time, I hope that I stumble into. I never say anything false about breakfast. I am reverential about breakfast. It is. That's the best breakfast I know, anywhere. So I was.
It was amazing.
That made me happy.
Very good.
So Carlos and I have done this a time or two before. He's been on the Zeitcast when I had the Son of a Preacher Man podcast. We actually did a live version of this before. Yeah. So we'll let the Spirit move however he or she will. But
love it.
I mean, there's so much that we could talk about. Maybe if y'all will indulge, for people who are not fans, for just a couple minutes. I was saying to folks earlier, for all the things that we love about, we do love Jesus. We love people, and we're engaged in the things that we do in the world, and we have such a soul connection. But we talk a lot about basketball.
The NBA.
And it's a good time to be an
allowed.
NBA fan.
It is a good time to be an NBA fan.
I appreciate your kind affirmation of the Thunder since you've been
I love
here.
they're doing so good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's enjoyable to watch them.
Yeah.
I'm a Russell Westbrook fan.
Yeah.
I've always
We miss
believed in him. The passion, the drive.
Yes.
And then all the turnovers included. But
That's,
yeah.
The
passion, the drive.
Did you read the essay I wrote one time about preaching and Russell Westbrook?
It's real. Yeah. But anyway, so I've been specifically a LeBron James fan, which gets me in trouble sometimes, and other times people celebrate it. But I think we're getting to the point where most NBA fans are like, LeBron, let's respect to the man, even if we didn't like him. But I read the SI article when he was 16 years old out of St. Mary's, being from the projects, single mom. She was 16 when she had him. And I read that, and there was something in me. It's like I was reading the gospel, I'm going to support this. I'm going to believe in this. I'm going to be a fan, and I have been.
Wow.
I've cried hard when he's won championships. I love to see the work that he does for the community, how consistent he's been with his family.
Yeah.
So, the power of a story, and LeBron has such a wonderful story, both on the court, out the court. So, yeah, it is a good time to be an NBA fan because there's so many of those good stories out there.
There are a lot of stories, a lot of great subplots and all that.
Definitely.
But I don't know.
Thunder.
I don't know. Yes. I'm telling you, our 3-guard lineup is nasty.
It's ridiculous.
Nobody knows how to stop us. Nobody knows how to stop us right now. It makes me happy. But I don't know if all the people want to talk about baskbasketball. The people probably want to hear you talk about the Lord. They probably want to hear you talk about our Lord.
They sure do. They're godly people.
As we phase into that, we were having a fun conversation with a couple of our friends here about Lin-Manuel being. You say he's from the same.
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah. Yes. Is he from the same town?
He is Vega Alta. So I live in Vega Alta, which is about 40 minutes west of San Juan, and it's a small town. It's next to Dorado, the classic story of most nations in the world. Dorado has all the fancy Ritz-Carlton hotels. Vega Alta was the town where all the workers, janitors lived in. Right, so you have the contrast of 5-star ridiculous hotels 5 minutes down the road. It's poverty, 38% unemployment, 6,300 a year of income. That's like, if you're lucky. So I live in the very in between of those two worlds. 5 minutes from my home is $1 Million Homes, and 3 minutes from my home is Doña Justina, one of the houses that we have restored since Hurricane Maria. She's 93, lives with her 56-year-old daughter, who mentally is more like 14. And I drove by their home hundreds of times going into town, assumed it was either abandoned or a crack house. Honestly, that's what we all thought. And then some of the neighbors called the mayor to say they're doing their necessities outside. They don't have running water. They don't have a bathroom. This is a year after Maria.
Wow.
So we literally just showed up, knocked on the door, started hugging them, loving them, just like, how can we serve you? And as the neighbors had said, we're walking by 14 dogs. You can imagine the conditions of two older ladies without a bathroom, no running water. So the fortunate thing for me leading the organization in Puerto Rico is that I can dream for 30 years. I can dream of what we could do for that family, and that it could be something that has dignity that they can leave for their grandkids. Where sometimes I have teams that come, great teams, missions teams that come for a week, and I have to explain to them, you might get a little bit frustrated because you're doing one part, right? And you might fix a room and you'll take the photos with the nice new room that you did, but you won't see the full picture. Because in that house, for example, I've had 8 different teams working. Each has done a great job, but safety and dignity, that's the main thing. So that's in the town of Lin-Manuel Miranda. That's where he spent his summers. I've connected with his family. They have this gorgeous little restaurant in the city plaza. And they are invested in the community. And I've met Lin-Manuel there in the plaza. He supports like local theater groups. And he flies from New York to San Juan, drives to Vega Alta, so 20 kids that nobody knows their names or their faces can perform in front of him.
Wow.
And he gets food for he's such a godly man.
That's awesome.
And his family is so beautiful. And it's a joy to be in community, again, that we can dream for what could be. So not just fixing homes in that town and the surrounding towns, but like talking to the mayor, hey, how can we do a beach cleanup? The next team that comes, and they enjoy the beach and they love it and we have fun, but let's do a day where with city employees we just, so it's just exciting. And sometimes people are like, man, you're in Puerto Rico and the earthquakes and the hurricanes. I'm like, dude, not feel sorry for me one bit. Do not give money to organization out of pity, because we're having an amazing time. We're living with the most incredible neighbors that cook the best rice and beans. We are surrounded by beauty and overcoming and people that are willing to just, get dirty doing the God stuff.
That's awesome.
And it's a joy.
That's awesome.
It really is.
I'm excited about coming to hang out with you too. We're making that happen for sure.
And this is an open invitation to the table.
Yeah.
To send us a
seriously.
team to Puerto Rico.
We've been talking about this.
Seriously, it's awesome.
Yeah, we really do want to come. So much I want to ask you about. One of the things we touched on just briefly earlier, I feel like I feel like whenever we talk privately and publicly, one of the things that always happens is that, and it's interesting, because I feel like we both are very much a product of our respective traditions. I mean, I know you had a powerful conversion story, but kind of both part of this Pentecostal charismatic story that we hold dear, and a lot of experiences we hold dear.
Yeah.
And yet doing the things that we do and care about things that we care about in terms of justice and all that. I just feel like we're both people who are in a lot of conversation with people who are in some kind of a faith transition now, trying to figure out what to do with where they've come from, where they're going now, and just kind of how to sort all of that out. The last podcast that we did, we were talking specifically about even some of the groups that have supported you before that are pulling back because they find the things that you say about Jesus and justice to be too pointed and too political, makes them want to back away and all that. But I wanted to ask you specifically, because I just, here tonight, we've got a number of people here who are part of our community, and I'm eternally grateful for the kind of safe space and the beautiful people that we've been able to connect with here. But I know a lot of folks aren't in communities where they have that sense of belonging, and a lot of people are trying to discern how long do they stay, when do you go? It seems like that's something that's been sort of percolating in your heart. I'd love to hear what you...
Yeah, for sure.
Just to speak into that.
I've been thinking about like a farmer that that you respect, and they got these cows and these bulls, and you know that they do a good job, that they're feeding them good food, and you've heard that they produce good milk, and in the city people drink their milk, excuse me, and they invite you over to have a meal. So you assume because they've been a good farmer, you've had their milk, that they're going to give you a good steak. But then you get to their farm, and there's this big event, and then they serve you bullshit, right? And sorry for the language, but
that was an unexpected turn, Carlos.
No, but think about it, so they're serving you BS. You're expecting steak. That they have good quality milk. So I've had experiences, right, where I've been in places where I've known the quality of their product. I've heard of the people that have worked in their farms, and I'm expecting something, and then I'm getting the worst. And it's so hard as a Latino that was pastoring in North Carolina to be in the context of I'm expecting steak, and I've had the milk at least, and I know it's good, and then I was being served white supremacy and expected to feast on it and be grateful for it. And it broke my heart over and over again. Because in itself, I was like, when Trump won that night, I had 3 nights where I couldn't sleep. And it's not just the fact that Trump won, it's the fact that his winning proved something that was always here, which was, you're the lead pastor of this church, which was clearly part of the 81%. And I almost let them get away with, the prophet saying, he's a trump, that kind of language of the trumpet of the Lord, that was from our camp.
Yeah, sure.
And the anointed of the Lord, and all that stuff was coming from, but I was like, he's going to lose, so it's whatever. And then he wins, and then I'm like, I can't sleep because my people did this, but obviously in a greater context, but and then they're expecting me to be okay with it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, so this whole time I've been kind of validating the fact that they have these racist tendencies. They're enamored with this illusion of white supremacy, this narrative. And in a way, me being their pastor says, I can't be that racist because my pastor's name is Carlos Rodriguez from Puerto Rico. And he looks like he's from Jordan. And, and I definitely, and so it was so hard. To realize that the place that I thought was feeding me steak was giving me BS.
Because I hear a lot of people talk about this, was that election and everything that kind of came up during that 2016, was that a crucial
100%.
Moment for you in terms of kind of a turning point?
So now I get to see the positive side, which there's not many. And I probably saying positive is the wrong word even. But there is a gift in the Trump era. And I feel it's the gift of clarity. And I get to have clarity about what some of my friends think about immigrants. Like before, it was kind of gray. And yeah, you have your issues and you've made your jokes, but whatever. But now I know for sure, right, that whether they love Jesus or not, whether they worship him as king or not, whether they've prayed the sinner's prayer or not, when they see an immigrant, they think, no, not here, not in my space, not in my country, not in my, right?
Yeah.
The gift of clarity of like, so a refugee who's running away from violence is coming begging for help, bringing their children, and you're saying, no, not here, not us, not my space. So there is a weird, and again, I use positive first, and then I use gift, and probably both wrong words to use, but the clarity, I've seen it now, I get to see it now as a gift, where I get to choose. Everybody's welcome to the table.
Yes, yes.
But there are things that need to be addressed, that need to be confronted, that need to be exercised, as you preach for a couple of times, a couple of years ago. You're talking about exercising the demon of.
Till people got tired of hearing me talk about it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I don't hear
I loved
say
it
no more. I think that's also important, Carlos, and I feel like I love hearing it from your perspective, from coming inside that world and feeling like that has been home and family for you, and even that sense, I think a lot of people feel a kind of betrayal.
Yes.
Because I still feel like for a lot of people that I know, and I legitimately tried to walk, I still actually try to walk softly here insofar that I'm not trying to impugn any individual's motives. But I realize in the Trump era how hard it still is for people that I love and I'm close to convince them that, because don't get me wrong, when people want to say, well, all politics are corrupt and this, it's true to a point.
Sure.
Chris Hedges, one of my favorite writers and thinkers, I think one of the most important of our time, I think really hits this hard how, especially in America, our left and right are both actually very, very corporate. And there's a certain kind of corporate politicization. Like both sides are problematic to a point. And yet I think especially around race, Trump is a unique disaster. And it has to be said. It's a unique disaster. This is not like garden variety. The way that's part of what's so interesting, I feel like, about the narratives that we've spun, because the truth is for the last 30 years or so in America, we've been governed slightly to the left of center or slightly to the right of center. Again, always like issues, but I think especially around like race, because my deal with the whole like Trump phenomenon is that it seems like racism and white supremacy is not a peripheral feature, but the galvanizing energy of the whole thing.
It is 100%. And we can honestly say in Puerto Rico, and not everybody would say this, that's a wrong generalization, but most people would clearly state Hurricane Maria took lives, Trump took more. We could say that with certainty, with scientific facts. The people that died post-Maria were many more than the ones that died during the storm. We are a nation, we're an island in the Caribbean, so most of our homes have been concrete, and we'll talk about how that's now a trap because of all the earthquakes we've been having. But, you know, that during the storm per se, there were a number of deaths, no doubt. But post the storm, the president comes to Puerto Rico, and he throws paper towels at a crowd. He leaves 3 hours before he was even scheduled to go. He makes a mockery of the numbers of deaths that we're having. We only had 60-something. Katrina was worse. And then a couple of things happen. The administration, of course, he is the leader of the administration. They're like, okay, so it's not that big of a deal, so let's move on. And organizations that are conservatives that are actually on the ground trying to help are saying, well, the president said it's fine, so we can also move on. So the consequences were abysmal, were tragic. I personally met people in one trip that were dead on the next trip. A gentleman in the town of Quebradilla, who I came to see him, and at that point, we're just delivering water filters. There's no electricity, there's no cell phone signal. We're driving to the towns that we know were the most affected, knocking on doors, trying to figure out, coming with doctors and other organizations. A gentleman that told me, I don't have my insulin, I can't keep it, I can't get it. The next time we come to that town, 3 weeks later, he had died. He passed away. And there's thousands of those stories. The highest estimate is 4,300. The lowest estimate is 2,800. Whereas during the storm, it was about 60-something people that died. And that's a direct consequence of, you're second-class citizens.
Yeah.
You are not white. You are not rich. So you don't matter.
Yeah.
And we paid for it.
Ooh. Isn't it odd, especially given our context, that it feels like it takes this much time and energy to try to convince people that words matter?
Yeah.
Because it feels like where we came from,
Yeah.
this emphasis on what you speak and speaking in faith or not speaking in faith, the words are everything. And now it's like, no. These words are not trivial. They have consequences.
Severe consequences. Life and death consequences. The power of life and death is in the tongue. And we're seeing it from the highest office in the land, who is our president, but we can't vote for him.
Yeah.
Which is part of legitimizing what you're talking about, the left and the right. We've been a colony under Democratic presidents and under Republican presidents.
Sure.
We haven't stopped being a colony. And there's no real efforts on either side to sort out possibly our number one issue, the fact that we are an American colony. I actually paid more taxes last year living in Puerto Rico, federal taxes, than I ever paid my 10 years living in Raleigh,
that's shocking.
which makes no sense.
Yeah, wow.
It's taxation without representation.
Yeah.
We don't have a voting member in Congress, and we can't vote for the president that denied aid to us when we needed it the most. So, yes.
I'm curious, by the way, would that be like I know nothing would have a consensus, but across the spectrum in Puerto Rico, would most people agree with that assessment, or is that, or is it just as polarized there?
Just as polarized there.
Okay.
More and more, and for those of you, maybe you follow the news, 6 months ago, there was a big march. About 1 million people were on the streets. We actually got rid of that governor that kind of led the island while Hurricane Maria came through. And, you know, it was a beautiful thing because there were no violence, you know, some attacks from police officers back and forth with some demonstrators, but nobody died. There was no, you know, bloody scenes of the people marched, the people said enough, the people said something needs to change. So the president was saying, and he wasn't wrong in saying that there was corruption on the island.
Yeah.
So the island responded was like, well, we're going to get rid of the corrupt people. Tag, you're it. The ball's on your court. And so it's been brutal because it feels like we're stepchildren.
Yeah.
And we have an angry, weird, tricky stepfather. And we're kind of meant to feel like at least you have a family, so you should be grateful for that. And going back to enjoy the BS and feast on it. It's that constant feeling of you belong, you don't. And some of my progressive friends are like, no, Puerto Ricans are Americans. We're not. I get what they're saying. I appreciate the sentiment. You're trying to kind of stand up, but we're not. Culturally, we're not. We've been Americans. We've been really Americans when there's been wars. Okay. And actually, Puerto Ricans became American citizens as the First World War was starting.
Interesting.
Both the Korean War and the Vietnam War. In terms of quantity of people who die from each state in both of those wars, more Puerto Ricans than anybody from any other state represented. Wow. If you go to Washington, D.C., the Vietnam War, you're going to see Rodriguez and Martinez way more than any other last name. So, yeah, so the correct narrative, I feel, is let us choose. Let us heal, help us recover, and then let us make the decision whether we want to be part of this toxic family that has been brutal for more than 100 years to us. Ooh.
Which is interesting. I actually think it's an interesting sentence, specifically in context even of this idea of, you know, talking about people trying to discern around faith communities. Because I think often people feel like they don't have a choice. And yet in some ways it feels like until you're able to choose your identity, choose your people or whatever, then I don't know. What does it mean to be part of a church, to be part of a nation, whatever, if there's not an authentic choice?
Bro, I'm guilty. I was very guilty of this while I was pastoring in Raleigh. I use so much language of family, brothers and sisters, and I'm a spiritual father, which makes it even more damaging when there's a moment where people have to say, I can't be part of this anymore. Because now you're betraying your family. From the blood of Jesus, right? Yes. Your blood family from heaven. And leaving these communities, I played that part of really, I was building my kingdom because I needed people to promote my book and I wanted them to share my sermons and I wanted them to come to my church. And the language of family was the way to get them to come and stay. Welcome home. I kept saying that all the time. Now I think about it, it's like, Lord, forgive me, like this. And there's so much beauty in the concept of family. So I come from a very broken family. I am the firstborn of both of my parents' second marriage. I was never allowed to call my half-sisters half-sisters. It was illegal in my family. We all belong. We can all be at the table. I call my dad's ex-wife mom. She's in our Christmas photos. It took time to get to that point of healing and reconciliation. But there was this language in my family, like everybody belongs no matter what. And we got to that point, which was beautiful. But I used that in church to make people belong to me as opposed to belong to the family of God. Because when they belong to the family of God, then they can be in our church, or they can be in another church, or they can be in no church. They're still part of the family. So it was really like this. It's more of a tribe. You're building tribe. And I'm the chief. And we will eat you.
Yes.
We will eat your butt.
Yes.
This is the meatiest part.
Yeah.
And I just went to Alive, that movie.
Oh, yes, yes, I do remember Alive.
Oh, man. So, yeah, it's giving people permission to leave toxic families, giving people permission also to stay when they really sense they have to stay.
Which sometimes people don't have mercy for that.
Yeah, exactly.
When somebody feels like they feel called to stay. Like you can feel called to stay to something that might not be especially healthy.
It doesn't mean that you're just an unhealthy person that doesn't have the guts to leave. Some people have been called to stay, and they do have a place of influence to bring change. I have friends that stayed at our church back in North Carolina that are still there doing that. And I honor them and respect them for that. For the ones that have to run away, run.
Absolutely.
Run hard.
Absolutely.
Run fast. Get out, because if it is the family of God, then there's space anywhere for that to be true.
That stirs up a lot of me. One, I feel like it's so presumptuous in general to try to tell people what their spiritual path should be. And whenever that, sort of descends into a kind of legalism where there's this idea that like somehow I know a priori or whatever, that where what people ought to do, like, no, like, people have to have space to take a legitimate journey. And I think if you don't, I always think about, and I know you've preached so powerfully on the story of the prodigal son, but I think so much about how even when the father knows that the inheritance he's going to give early is going to be misspent, he still gives him the money because that's how much choice matters. That's what love looks like, is you always leave the back door open. There's never like an attempt to coerce. But I think especially like within our faith communities, there's so much coercion that, we don't know. And I love your vulnerability about that. I think so often like we don't have the resources to discern the difference between our family and the family of God, or when I might be building my tribe, my kingdom versus whatever, because it's also collapsed. It is. And it's messy, and we don't, and it's hard. Those things are legitimately hard for people to disentangle.
Going back to the prodigal son, like in the original, in the Greek, it's so clear. The son asks for property. Father, give me the property that belongs to me. But the father gives him his bios, his life. We get the word biology, the study of life. So I can picture the son like, give me the money. And the father is, here's the money, but here's how you budget that money. Here's how you spend it. He's given him his life, his experience, his knowledge of it. Okay, I want the horses. Here's the horses. Here's how you ride them. Here's how you care for them. He's given him his life, no doubt, fully, not just take the stuff, which probably my youngest asked for the inheritance early. And we're like, take the stuff. Probably that'd be a little bit more my reaction. But the father, and different to the other parables, the good shepherd that goes after the sheep, the woman that searches the house for the coin, the father does not go back into the foreign lands to get the son, waits for the son. But as an act of life, I have liberated you to be fully you. And in that place, now you can find me and actually be a son to me, which is a beautiful thing.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
So freedom, it is for freedom that Christ set us free. Where the Spirit of the Lord, there is freedom. That whole concept of freedom is so good. It's so beautiful and so celebrated in the context of American history, the whole concept of freedom. And maybe in Puerto Rico, it could be our turn to have that experience of being free, of figuring out life on our own. And I don't know how that would look like, but I'd be up for it.
I'm wondering, Carlos, about now that you've been being back in Puerto Rico for a while, and bringing in teams from different kinds of places. I'm curious as to how you think about the whole idea of mission now. Maybe even I don't know how you would distinguish between mission and missions. I think, as we talk about toxic forms of spirituality, a lot of us would now name or identify plenty of things that have been toxic about how we've understood missions, especially some version of white people on a white horse coming in to we will stamp out your culture, we will take your maize, we will take whatever is valuable to you, and now we are going to give you our songs, our culture, whatever, plenty wrong with that. And yet at the same time, people desperately need to be broken out of the worlds from where they come from. And one of my critiques, in fact, about where I think a lot of people go when you get, again, I never try to be hard on anybody, but I think if you just get in a burning down mode, that can just kind of be a reason to sort of sit around your underwear playing video games in the sense of that's not going to move the story forward at all.
No.
Is that if you never engage people outside, there's no there's no socioeconomic critique. There's no real engagement with anybody who would be some sort of perceived other. So what is that? If you break away from fundamentalism and now you're just kind of whacking off or whatever, we can edit that if we need to. So I'm just curious, how how that shifted for you, how you think about mission now. What do you do? Especially when I know that people that are coming and doing work with you right now are coming from diverse places, very theologically, and culturally.
So I have amazing stories and I have horrific stories. Unfortunately, my latest one is a horrific one, and the earthquakes that have been happening since the 28th of December, there's been more than 1,000 quakes in Puerto Rico, some of them up to 6.8. I mean, the ground was shaking, waking us up. The worst part is not when it shakes like that, but when it drops and you feel your body drops. It's so wild. And I was so stressed for so many days because I'm thinking of the work that we need to do now, but also I'm thinking of my own family and taking care of my kids. It was just it has been a wild time. So I'm grateful to be in Oklahoma, where the ground is not shaking. To be honest with you, I'm just happy I was at the hotel and I had a moment where I was I assumed that it was shaking because I've been so used to the last 3 weeks of that happening. So please keep Puerto Ricans, especially in the South, Puerto Ricans in the South, in your prayers. But I've already encountered teams, and it's so sad because there's so much potential for good. And disaster zones are if you're addicted to the white savior complex, disaster zones are a crack house.
Wow.
They're the doctor that, gives you the opioids that you shouldn't be having. Because they come and it's immediately, especially Puerto Ricans, Latinos, we're grateful. We see people, you make a little bit of an effort, you say hola, we want to hug you. You don't have to speak Spanish to come to Puerto Rico and connect with people. It's amazing the teams that I've had that speak zero Spanish and they've made friends that they still talk to on the phone.
Wow.
But then I've recently, unfortunately, I've had teams that are coming and it's legitimate. The camera is the main thing that they're bringing. It's the main, right? And the story. Okay, bring the camera. I don't mind it. We think we're cute. We like being on the camera. But how about we become the heroes of that story? Because we've just endured an earthquake, and we've been enduring 2 years of terrible administration from the government, and we've endured one of the worst hurricanes in recorded history. And so many people that come, and there's the photo, and there's the drone going over them as they're praying over Puerto Rico, their prayer is the valid one, because our prayers suck, because we're still having the quakes. There's just, and it's brutal. And yet at the same time, so here I am thinking, I'm seeing this scene, and I'm just disgusted by it. But they're bringing money. And with that money, I'm buying backpacks, I'm buying whistles. Whistles are the thing in Puerto Rico right now, because if you get stuck in between concrete, the whistle can save your life. That little thing people are walking around with whistles, right? It's like a fashion thing now to have your whistle, especially a metal one, because the one with the pellet inside, dogs can't hear it, but the metal one, if you're stuck somewhere, a dog can hear it, and something like that, right? And they're bringing that stuff, so it's the way you're doing it, but you're here.
Yeah.
And I'm faced with that. I've had 17 teams, 18 now in Puerto Rico, from very different backgrounds. I've had Brian Sart's church send a team. I've had people from the most liberal churches send a team. I had a guy that literally landed in Puerto Rico with the MAGA hat in a team. Great at construction.
Wow. Yeah.
He was awesome. And he's never had rum, and I got him into rum.
Okay.
And that helped.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And I kid you not, the fact that I did not allow him to watch Fox News in my house, because he was staying in my house, was my spot. It was like detox for him.
Wow.
It's almost like he had space in his brain and his heart to think differently, just because he wasn't being fed. And you've talked about this better than I have, about the fox has discipled people out of the lamb. Like it really has. And so I'm constantly in the difficult transaction of, there's these people that are coming with complicated theology, and but because I'm local, because I'm Puerto Rican, ultimately, in that sense, I have the authority. They're not just in my country, they're in my home, they're staying in my house. I'm making room in my kids' room for them to sleep there. So that allows me to speak more into it. So I don't want to disregard completely the whole concept of short-term missions, because the people that come get transformed. And again, they're not meant to come to be able to come back to their churches like, I just saw these poor kids smiling, and now I want to smile more, you know?
Right.
I don't want that to be the ultimate narrative, but I get it. But there's, and so I think about Jesus when the disciples were like, Jesus, that person is casting out demons in your name, and they shouldn't be doing it. And Jesus is like, just let them. So I'm having to battle with all that. Like, I'm having to draw and I like this past team, I had to draw a line and say, I love you guys, I honor you, I can't work with you. Like the way that you're approaching this is not the way that we want to approach it or continue to approach it. I appreciate the fact that you came, that you brought needed help at the moment. And I'm due to have another conversation with them. Hopefully that confrontation helps them to think differently. Now, I'm not making it my responsibility for them to be transformed into people that now see Puerto Rico differently, but I could have some part to play in maybe turning their hearts towards grace, mercy, and the right way to do missions, which is not colonization, which is not in the white savior complex or anything like that. So it's hard, it's brutal. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it super wrong.
What does mission look like without colonization?
Oh, man. It looks like service, no doubt. Just straight up. I think I said this in the last podcast. It works in English, so every time I'm in an English context, I use this. The gospel, the word gospel, without the go, it's a spell. It's just like going to church, giving my offerings, raising my hands. You're in a spell. But with the go, there's something that happens in the go. And even when so many things in the go are wrong, it's in the go that you rediscover so many things about God, about Jesus, about others, about yourself. So I don't want to stop the go, because even for myself, there's some times where I'm like, things are not going right. And I know I just need to stop everything else I'm doing, and I just need to go visit Doña Justina and Doña Maria, and just like, I have no team, but I'm going to paint this part of the house that hasn't been painted yet. And in the going, things change. So I don't want to stop the go. But mission must look like service. Straight up, I'm going to serve you because it's the right thing to do. It's the washing of the feet. It's the honoring the other person. It's the celebrating their victory. It's the crying with those who are crying. It's the grieving with those who are grieving. And I think it's still possible. And it's hard for me to say this, especially publicly, but legitimately, I would say probably 80% of direct donation funding comes from conservative churches.
Wow.
A lot of them that are still very supportive of Trump.
That's so interesting.
Some of my biggest donors.
And what do you make of that?
I make a combination of the negative side, I'll start with that, would be it's a way to feel good about the fact that you're trying to solve that problem. You pay your way into a good conscience. Right? You kind of buy peace. I saw that issue, I sent some money, and now let Trump do his thing, I'm good. And the other context is, in some of our charismatic churches, there's just a very strong understanding, theological understanding of generosity, of honoring the man of God. And there's Carlos, and we've heard him preach 20 years ago, and now he's in Puerto Rico. We're going to honor what he's doing and the calling in his life, and we disagree with half of his politics. We're going to put some seed into that. Now, we've lost some of those seeds more and more because of the stuff that we do. But yeah, so there's good and bad, but it's kind of painful.
Yeah.
That so many of the people that I hear saying the right thing are not doing the right thing.
Right. Because that part is mysterious to me. Like,
it is mysterious.
Because it seems to me, I really don't know, but my closest thing to guess is that I feel like in some of those really conservative structures that, I always think about a Springsteen lyric, fear is a powerful thing, baby. Turn your heart black, you can trust. Take a God-filled soul, fill it with devil's dust. Fear is a powerful thing. Fear is a powerful driver.
Yes.
Fear is much more effective politically at uniting people, a common enemy. It really is. The fastest way to unite people is to identify a common enemy, et cetera.
Yeah.
Pragmatically, it works.
Yeah.
And I think that, especially when people start to move away from something that's fear-based, it takes a long time to replace that with something else.
Yeah.
So I think whether, with freedom.
With freedom.
So I think whether it's with generosity or just aspiring to be a basic, decent, good human on a fundamental level, I think a lot of people, when they first start to step away from this kind of system, are like, well, why would I do any of that? What would it even sort of social responsibility look like? Because they're still because you kind of get, and I get it, you have this moment of sort of hey, at least now I don't feel like I'm dangled over the flames of hell, and I think people just don't know what to do. It's like the old engine has been taken out, but there's not something new that's taking its place yet.
Yeah. Well, going back to the word gospel, which is good news. And to people in Puerto Rico, after Maria, a new roof was good news. So in the context of mission, whether you're trying to save people from hell or trying to get people into heaven, we can all agree that it's the gospel. It's good news to the poor. And especially for us Pentecostals, charismatic, Luke 4, as Jesus is proclaiming why he's here and how he's here. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor, to set at liberty those who are captives, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord, open the eyes of the blind, et cetera, et cetera. And so we, in the past, Holy Spirit, come so I can be in the green room and I can be respected and I can knock a few people down and I can, for me, use my jacket like this and throw it at the crowd. Oh, it felt awesome.
Did you do that?
Oh,
that's amazing. I can believe it.
Did I do that? Yeah. 12,000 people in Peru. Wham! Wow. And you kind of walk away like, so spiritual about it. Yeah. But really,
can you still do that now?
I could try. Shall we?
I might be up for an experiment. Some people don't know us well are like, where's the exit?
Well, maybe for some of the listeners that don't know, really, in the charismatic Pentecostal tradition, if you're thinking about that was the progressive space back in the day.
Yeah, that's true.
Because if you got the Spirit, whether you're male or female, black or white, you got the Spirit, you good.
Yes,
you anointed, you can do the works. Yeah. The Azusa Street Revival, it's a black man who was denied entry in a Texas theological seminary, who's now in California. The whole gift of tongues is makes a comeback, a great comeback, and is through a black man that was rejected, half blind, right? And so I saw that in the charismatic movement, especially in the late 80s, early 90s. It was in those churches that male, female, Catholics, Baptists, if you got the Spirit, you can prophesy, you can preach, you can pray for somebody. It got toxic, no doubt. It got distorted, no doubt. But there was this raw. And in Latin America, we love it. We just do. We love the energy. We love the fire. We love we all get to be part of that. And the Catholic Church, so I didn't grow up in a Christian home in the classic evangelical way, more culturally Catholic. But I was taught in my Catholic school as I was growing up, the liberation theology is just there. I always knew this whole preferential treatment for the poor. That was I remember, we talked about this before, there was a computer program in my Catholic school. And we were learning how to use a computer, but there were these questions that the nuns had prepared. And one of the questions was, does God prefer poor people?
Oh, no, we have not heard you say this.
And the right answer was yes. I mean, if you
Wow.
wrote no, the nun would come by
Yeah.
and tell you, yes, he does.
Wow.
He does prefer them. He must prefer them because God preferring the poor is the best thing that God can do for the rich.
Wow.
He must prefer them. He must be the God of the oppressed, of the abandoned, of the broken, of the hurting, of the lonely. He must be. That's the best thing that he can do for those that are in the worship of me, myself, and I instead of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So I don't even know why I went on that.
That's so
preaching
good. I'm
tandem
glad
right
you
there.
did, though. I'm glad you did. Well, because I think that idea, that is the powerful thing about that theology of the Spirit, is that
Yes,
it's so
that's what it was.
radically sort of democratic in that way. No,
Yes.
there is no, God is no respecter of persons, to use that King James language.
That's
And
right.
whoever the Spirit falls on has the authority in that moment. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter your pedigree, your background, your training, your education, or lack of it, your last name. Nothing matters. If the Spirit falls on you, then there's authority.
And I would be that person. I'm 21. I'm in Toronto. I go because somebody said there's a revival in Toronto. And that's when the internet was like, took a long time to connect, right? It's to 99, I think it's 98. And I'm hearing about there's this thing happening in Brownsville revival. And that was kind of a thing back in Charisma magazine is going, it's blowing up, and everybody's talking about all these moves of God. And I'm just like, I mean, I have no clue about this. I just like, okay, if God's doing something, I want to be where God is. And it was freezing and cold and terrible, and Canadians were nice, but everything else was horrible about it. But I was this Puerto Rican kid, and he's fiery, and they started to give me platform because there weren't all these hoops like, you got the Spirit, and you want to help people, you want to serve, you want to preach, here you go. They took me all around the world, they opened doors. And going back to kind of like leaving churches and family and traditions, I've had to make a conscious choice to keep the good.
Yeah.
To not fully disregard everything, because that would be stupid of me to fully disregard everything. So many godly things that I received, that I welcomed, that I learned. And I've caught myself not wanting to say stuff like they used to say it. Like, no, because I don't want to be associated. That's just dumb. Because there's truth and there's beauty and there was welcoming and they made room for me. And I get to be at this place right now speaking this foreign language because of those people that made room for me because of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm in constant turmoil about that balance of moving forward. And I've shared this story probably in every podcast that we've been here, that conversation that I had.
And I've shared it around the world and certainly here. So please, the first person though, this is better.
So my last meeting with who was my spiritual father in Toronto, he gave me this advice. He said, Carlos, one day you're going to call me and you're going to tell me about everything that God is doing in your life. And I'm going to tell you that's not God. And when I say that's not God, son, keep going because it is. His self-awareness to know that like it happened to him, there comes a point for every generation where we start moving into the new wine and the old wineskin is like, can't contain it. So I'm constantly in that tension of, he gave me permission. You know, I didn't need his permission, but as a son of that house for that season, I received that permission and I value it. And I'm not going to disregard everything that I learned from them, even though I get to sometimes directly speak against some of the toxic parts of it, which is such a weird tension.
You know how much I love that story. I feel like it's like the most self-aware kind of prophetic statement I've ever heard. And it's so, that idea that like when I can't go there with you, instead of like, know that
It is
God wants you to keep going.
going.
That's, I mean, that's shocking to me.
It is shocking.
And but I've told that story so much, and I know Reese can help me, and we always edit anything out of the podcast that needs to be. I'm going to share something I don't know if I've told you, and I will just offer no commentary on it.
Awesome.
I'll just simply state
I'll
it.
comment in Spanish.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's good. That's good. You know our friend, Randall Worley? Have you guys met?
Of course.
Sir Randall,
Yeah,
like whatever?
love Randall.
I don't know if he told you this or not, but several months ago, because he still has kind of connections in that world.
Sure, he does.
He was preaching at Bethel Church there in Reading on Sunday night, and he shared that story. He shared that story.
Did he
That's
really?
how he closed the message.
Did he really? That's powerful.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought so too. I was pretty excited about
That may be more meaningful to us than maybe other people listening.
I mean,
but
it's just interesting because I just think like, the idea for anybody, no matter who you are, for me to be confronted with, because that's what I have to be aware of is that, like there has been a time in my life then based on, I don't know, whatever kind of young, hungry state I was in where I was the young buck, the young gun who was open to like whatever. But I know I'm already hardening in things.
Yes.
To where I'm going to see God doing things that feel a little off the grid to me. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm open-minded and all.
Yeah.
But that definitely can't be the Holy Spirit. Because every generation does that. Every generation does. And to have the humility to be able to say something might really not feel quite right to me, not be what God done, but still give people permission to go on the journey that they need to go on. And to even imagine that could be God.
Yes. And I love that Jesus gave permission for that. And
yes.
The whole John 15, the old wine and the new wine. And he made room for that to be a continual reality.
Yes.
Even beyond his own earthly ministry,
yeah.
which we do see it in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. There's these conversations that Paul is having, that James are having, that are not direct conversations that Jesus is having, and there's permission to do that because that is just how God works.
Yes, yes.
He's just very comfortable with change, very comfortable with transition, very comfortable with uncertainty, which makes no sense, but he is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not comfortable with it, so when we're in uncertainty, we're like, God, where are you? And he's like, I'm fully in this place of uncertainty because he gets to be the anchor, the strong tower, and the Psalm gives us a lot of that language, how to deal with the in-between spaces that are horrible.
Yes,
he's my strong tower. I will stand on this rock and I will hold on for dear life. Even when I'm losing family and friends, I'm losing faith, I'll stand on Christ. And I guess that's as best as we can do.
I haven't talked about this in a long time, but I still think about it every week, I guess, is from that year I had when I spent a sustained amount of time studying Job. That was my big takeaway, is that I know like there's one text in Isaiah that refers to Leviathan, the sea monster, negatively, like God doing battle with Leviathan or like defeating Leviathan. But there's this verse because Leviathan, the sea monster, for the early Hebrew people represents chaos. It's literally the chaos monster.
Yes.
And so Job says early in the book of Job, he says to God, am I Leviathan or behemoth that you would crush me? So clearly his assumption is that God is the one who wants to crush the sea monsters.
Wow.
And yet when God finally talks back to Job in those last few chapters, there's like a whole chapter spent on God celebrating the wildness and the beauty of the sea monsters.
Yes.
And I feel like the subtext is, Job, no, you thought I wanted to crush the chaos monster. Oh, I'm at home in the chaos. The chaos monster is my pet.
Yes.
Can you whisper sweet nothings in the chaos monster's ear? Because I can. Could you bring it home as like a little house pet for your girls? Because I could. But there's this idea that like God is more at home in the chaos, and that I think then surely what it is to follow this God of the Exodus, who's always on the move, is for us to become more at home in the chaos.
Yes, that's so godly.
What time is it? Somebody, I don't even have something on me.
Doesn't matter.
Really? Is he offering? Well, I'll tell you what.
That's so godly.
I know it's gone. I know we've gone on for a minute, and I want us to have time to hang out before, and I'm sure other folks who want to talk. Let's just do this. I would hate doing a live podcast to not allow any room for some kind of interaction. So at least 2 or 3 questions if somebody has anything you want to throw at Carlos. Brad, please.
If you have one thing to give to people who didn't quite know a whole lot about the culture that you operate in, what is the one takeaway you would give somebody who would otherwise be clueless to that?
Culture and faith context, or like country context, like Puerto Rico context?
Puerto Rico.
Oh, thank you for asking. That's really nice of you. Yeah, so I would go back to that conversation of being the stepchild, the in-between. I have an American passport, right? So in that context, I am an American citizen. Yeah. Culturally, I don't feel American in any shape or form. I feel like a foreigner here. And even 10 years of living in Raleigh, North Carolina, I way more identified with the immigrant experience than I did with the American experience, even though I am an American. Puerto Ricans are sometimes more Americans than Americans because we've been Americans since 1908. Like my great-grandparents were Americans, right? Became American citizens. So many of my friends in America, great-grandparents were still somewhere in Europe. So but yet that tension, right, of being and not being, but yet even with those complicated emotions, bro, you come to Puerto Rico. Are you married?
Married?
Are you married yet?
I'm not married.
Are you single?
Yes.
Yeah, so come to Puerto Rico. You will be, just come to Puerto Rico. We are welcoming people. And again, in the complicated relationship with the U.S. and with gringos, right? We are so welcoming and so like, come and learn. Like, we're willing to teach you. We're willing to dance with you. We're willing to confront the wrong ideas that you have about Puerto Rico. And then maybe that helps confront the wrong ideas you have about Latin America in general, about the Caribbean in general. So, yeah, come. And let's live out that question there.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You were just invited to come find love.
Yeah,
I
that's
believe.
basically,
come find love
yes.
in Puerto Rico.
Basically, yes.
Great. That's it over here? Yes, well, please.
I would love to hear more about your family and what it's like to
Aw.
be on mission with your family to go.
Ooh.
That's awesome. Yes, so living in Puerto Rico has been quite possibly the healthiest thing for our family. We were just talking about the fact when we were pastors in North Carolina, our church tradition was very inclusive of women in ministry. We were so like pro women in ministry that we forced women to be in ministry. So we were progressively oppressive, which is a real thing.
Indeed.
So, for example, so my wife did not want to be a pastor. And it was one salary for the two. So it was kind of cheeky, right?
Twofer.
Because you're getting 2 for 1. And her, a very skilled, trained, capable person who was extremely pastoral and in the kind of charismatic context, very prophetic, very intuitive about what people were needing and how to address those needs and how to love people. A very healthy 2 in the Enneagram. Very life-giving person. But she didn't want to be a pastor. And I was like, woman, the Lord has called you to be a pastor. You grab that mic and you preach the gospel and you show the world that we are a ministry that promotes women in ministry. So that was hard, very hard. And we went through the worst patch of our marriage. I ended up not being the lead pastor anymore. I was full of anger and bitterness. And we went through a year of not being in ministry, just going through counseling weekly. It was about 3 months of the therapist convincing me that I was the problem and me trying to convince him, like, I'll take 99% of the blame, but there's got to be at least 1% for Catherine. I'll take 98% of the blame. Give 1 to Catherine and 1 to the church because they've been jerks to me. And it was about 3 months of, like, own up to your stuff. There's no healing. There's no moving forward unless you fully take responsibility for your stuff. So moving to Puerto Rico was where we got to dream together again in the context of her being fully herself without any spiritual mumbo jumbo from her husband trying to be the super progressive pastor that's really oppressive in his progressiveness. And it's been so healing to just do.
That's awesome.
She gets to be involved when she wants to and not. She loves horses, so she mostly deals with horses and has this whole thing that she does with like autistic kids and horse and this whole therapy that I don't get it, and she loves it. And now it's so liberating for us to honor each other. The kids love having the teams over. So we open up our home. We feel like that's part of our gifting, hospitality, welcoming. Let's have rice and beans. Let's work on a home for 12 hours. Let's go to the beach and have fun. Let's support local businesses. And then when the teams leave, we have like 4 days where we do nothing. Just my wife and I go on dates and hang out at home with the kids in school, So it's great to do mission together when there's place for everybody to choose whether they want to be in that mission. And there's a space as a family where we know what we're doing, but there's clear, this is my role, this is my job. And same for the kids. We do the same for the kids. Do you guys want to join us with the teams? There's been teams that are like, no, we don't want to hang out and we don't want to go paint. And there's other teams that the whole weekend they just come and they're painting in the houses that we're rebuilding and they're super involved. And so It's great.
That's
it
awesome.
really is so great. I'm not trying to hype it up. It's just awesome. And not just mission in the context of our family, but my extended family. I'm the only boy. I have 5 sisters, and they are just the most glorious, supportive, and having nieces and nephews being involved. So my first trip, so the big earthquake was on the 7th of January. On the 9th of January, I was with 14 family members, a cousin who's a doctor, my father, my uncle who's another doctor, my sister who's the executive director of this pharmacy who brought like 100 meals to give out. And all these family members, that was my mission team. Half of them not really believers that go to church or any context, but I was leading them on this trip, and it was so beautiful to do it. So even in the context of greater family, which I've always felt is kind of the hardest part about living in America, in Raleigh, was losing that sense of big family, right? And everybody being so insular and not really being able to like know my neighbors.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would walk into our apartment. We lived in an apartment complex, and neighbors that would just like intentionally don't give you eye contact. It's so bizarre. In Puerto Rico is almost the opposite. It's almost like the strangest person is like, they're hugging and kissing you, and you're having this long conversation. So yeah, the mission in the context of our immediate family, but also like the greater family and the community, which has been great. It's so good. Highly recommended.
Such a great question.
Yeah, it is.
I love that.
It is.
One more, Jackie.
Sorry if I missed this, but you have talked about how you're not allowed to vote.
Yeah.
My ignorance is showing because how is that possible? How is that continuing? What can we do about that? Because that just sounds just straight crazy.
It is straight crazy. Yes.
So did I interpret?
Yeah,
what you were
you're right.
saying?
Yeah. So it's really wild. We get to vote in the primaries if the parties decide that they want to count the Puerto Rico as votes. So when Barack was going against Hillary, they campaigned in Puerto Rico because we have more electoral college votes than like 4 other states, like more than Rhode Island, more than. So if we were included, part of why we haven't had any serious conversation about becoming a state or being fully independent is because if we do become a state, it's 100% a political thing. Where would those electoral votes go? To which party?
Oh, right.
It's almost impossible to figure that out. So that's been one of the reasons. But yes, if we live in America, so if you're a Puerto Rican and you move and you get residency in Florida or whatever, you're immediately allowed to vote as an American citizen. But in Puerto Rico, depending on the parties, if they do want to have primaries in Puerto Rico, they have them and they count them for primaries, but not in the presidential election. It's never happened. It's never been allowed. Up to the 50s, the governor was assigned from Washington, an American that was just sent to Puerto Rico to be the governor. And then in 52 was the first time that we actually elected a Puerto Rican to be, actually the first time America chose a Puerto Rican to be. And then we got to start elections. So it's similar to a state in the context of a governor and House and Senate, like a state would have. But we have 0 representation in Congress. We have an office in Congress. It's called the Commissioner Resident, but the lady who's in charge now, she can't vote in anything. She's basically like a lobbyist trying to convince the people who could vote to maybe do something to care about Puerto Rico, which is demeaning in itself.
Yeah.
But you still pay taxes.
Depends. Not all Puerto Ricans. It really depends on your kind of business, how much you travel to the States. So it's not an overall thing. We do pay taxes in something called the Jones Act. Basically, everything that comes to Puerto Rico. So if Dominican Republic wants to sell us something, it has to first go to Miami to get taxed in Miami, and then it gets sent to Puerto Rico, even though they're a couple of hours away from us. So
You have to pay more.
yes, everything in Puerto Rico is more expensive. Cars are 48% more expensive, the same car in Puerto Rico than here.
Wow.
Because of the Jones tax.
So interesting.
Yeah. So
It's maddening.
it is, yeah. It's ungodly.
Yeah.
It's un-American. Really. But the best thing would be, to answer your question really, to empower Puerto Ricans to decide, what do we want? What do we want? Even though we've had, I don't want to exaggerate, in my lifetime, at least 4 referendums about choosing statehood or independence. None of them have mattered. We've done them. We've spent millions of dollars. There've been campaigns about it because it's only an act of Congress can decide whether we become a state or it's not even up to us. We get to say what we want, and we have in the past.
But you just don't have a voice.
We literally do not have a choice to whether be Americans or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about choice tonight. It's interesting how that's come full circle.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for choosing to be with us in Oklahoma
man.
City.
My pleasure.
Can we let Carlos know how much we appreciate him being here tonight? What a great evening. I'm glad we get to hang out all weekend, all the way till Monday. Carlos will be with us Sunday morning at the table. Been good for my soul. Good gracious.
For my soul. And my belly, too. The
Oh,
food.
my goodness. I'm glad you're loving the food.
Good job, Oklahoma. I'm
Yes,
telling you.
yes. Who knew, right?
2 meals I've had here,
I know.
man.
It's
Off the chain.
now we've got the bar high, though.
Yeah,
I don't know. We've got to keep the
seriously.
streak going. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out and being with us. Carlos, would you mind just praying a kind of blessing over everybody before
love to.
I'd love that.
I'd love to. Thank you, Father, for your kindness, your beauty, your consistency, for being consistently good and faithful and mysterious. Thank you that we can't figure you out and we get to trust you. And we make that choice to trust you in the midst of so much confusion and uncertainty and so many things that seem like in turmoil. We choose to trust you. And thank you that we can confidently say that you are in control and confidently say that you're not controlling. And we appreciate that about you. As a father, as a God, as a friend, as a savior, we love you, we honor you, and we pray for legitimately good year, 2020, of change and transformation. And if we need to be scared and we need to be in the chaos for a bit, we'll trust you through it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everybody. Good night.